Okay, let me take you through some of my Pokemon comics from 2022 through, I think, the beginning of 2024. Yeah, I did these for a surprisingly long amount of time, with some of the content, as you'll see as we get a little later into things, being kind of really out of season for what was popular at the time, but all of it is still like really relatively recent stuff. I said 2024, so there's no Legends ZA stuff. It's gonna be mostly Scarlet and Violet and Legends Arceus. So to start things off, we've got this comic called The Stony Cliff Titan. Now, what I originally planned was for me to do one based on all of the Titans from Scarlet and Violet. Plot-wise, there's not really much to explain here because you already know the plot if you've played Scarlet and Violet. All I was planning to do for these was take Arven's story and essentially just like comicify it. Basically, I was gonna do what Pokemon actually does themselves for like when they do their Pokemon manga, the Pokemon Adventures manga. And I was just gonna have these scenarios where I show the battle that ensues whenever you go and actually do a Titan battle, but in comic form. And I was gonna make it like really cool, really over the top. Basically just something that you'd see from like the anime, but like with my own ideas and through my own sense of style, my own sense of what I thought would be really cool to see and do. And people really like this one, which I'm really happy about. On Instagram and Twitter, this comic didn't do amazingly well. Like the traction wasn't super high. But on Reddit, people absolutely loved it. It was pretty much the direct opposite. So yeah, it's just one of those little reminders where it's like not all social media platforms are created equal. Like in terms of who's on there, what they want, how they promote things. It was like a night and day difference. It's kind of nuts actually. So for this, I decided to give Florian a Ceruledge because I thought it would be really cool. And I really wanted to draw Ceruledge because I like Ceruledge quite a bit. As time has passed, I've actually preferred Armarouge. But like either way, I still just can't believe how unbelievably cool either of them are. There's a lot of rule of cool stuff that they've put into these designs that is not typically in the Pokemon design philosophy. So with that being said, I just had to draw a Ceruledge for my first comic. This was my first Pokemon comic, by the way. I really jumped head first into the deep end with this one, huh? Ceruledge was a complete and utter nightmare to draw. Ceruledge isn't necessarily like super bad all the time. It's just that like for certain particular angles, drawing Ceruledge's blades was like so incredibly awkward, and I just couldn't picture what I should have done for like getting certain angles to look correct. And so like I knew I wasn't crazy. I was so curious to see what they would do for the Pokemon anime for the scenes that involved a Ceruledge in them. There is a main character in the new Pokemon Horizons anime who has a Ceruledge, and when it comes to Ceruledge's blades, they don't actually draw them. Instead, Ceruledge has this like wibbly fire effect on the blades. And I was like, I knew it. Oh, I knew it. But other than that, this was a pretty fun comic to make. Basically, this massive cloth just has Florian on the back foot. Ceruledge is taking a lot of damage. And then out of nowhere, Arven shows up with his Shelter to bail him out. And we finish things off with this really cool shot of this like X-slash a Ceruledge does on the cloth. And I had this really cool idea to have the Shelter just sit there right on Ceruledge's shoulder as a nice final little touch to everything. So for these next ones, these are the parent comics. These parent comics are like basically barely even comics. This is the section where I'm essentially just going to go over a little lesson that I learned in terms of me kind of like determining whether or not I even really need to make something a comic or if I should make it an illustration. I was going through this like strange artistic phase where I wanted to draw certain characters, but I don't know, I couldn't justify just drawing only that character. So I tried to do my darndest to force them into being in a comic. Now, conceptually, these comics aren't really that bad. Basically, these parent comics are a series of comics where I would have her go all around the world and randomly take photos of prominent characters in the Pokemon universe that we know. I was going to start with Scarlet and Violet because that's the original region that Parent is introduced, but I had a lot of ideas about her going to like Galar, and maybe she like catches a glimpse of Milo while he's rolling like a bunch of hay. Or maybe she's been called up by Nessa for a fashion shoot. Cause like, you know, it's funny, the series is called Pokemon, but I prefer drawing actually like the human characters when it comes to Pokemon. I appreciate the human designs basically just as much, if not more, than the Pokemon designs, honestly. It's something that I feel like Pokemon really excels at. It's really cool. So with this particular series, I wanted to highlight that, but I didn't go very far with it, and I didn't really like execute it nicely. And so this is a lesson that I learned pretty quickly, like throughout the process of me making these, which is why they're so short. I kind of realized after a while, I was like, I don't think this is like really necessary. I don't need to attach a random story to just drawing cool looking characters that I appreciate. After a bit, I kind of thought, and I was like, yeah, these should just be like illustrations. Yeah, so like for this Iono comic, for example, this is like super unfinished actually, because I was like, what's the point of doing any of this actually? I drew some of it for practice, but I was like, this is just not necessary. I should just draw some interesting pictures of Iono, right? Like all the plot stuff surrounding this, it wasn't very clever, it wasn't really funny. I was just kind of like going through the motions because I felt like I needed to kind of make it into a comic, make it in comic form, because that's what I had been consistently doing around that time. Just overall very strange phase. Now, with that being said, a lot of the artwork in this is pretty cool. I like it a lot. I like the job that I've done. I just think like writing wise, that part of the execution was really strange. For example, I love this shot of Iono here being illuminated by Belly Bolt. This was also before I would use white gel pens in my black and white illustrations. So any of the little scratches that you see here, it's just me picking and choosing where I want to place like my actual ink. It actually took me quite a while to start using white gel pens. I only started recently using them probably around the end of 2024, I'd say. And like once I started using them, I kind of wondered why or how I lived my life the way I was living it as an artist before. Yeah, but also when you don't have access to those kinds of tools, it trains your fundamentals to like the absolute upper limit, you know? I don't necessarily suggest doing this because it just makes your life that much harder, but you do get something out of it. It's like, it's the age-old Rock Lee with the weights. You take the weights off and now I'm like moving at the speed of lightning. And so here we have a pretty large section. This is the Pokemon Legend Arceus section. Also, my Adaman and Irida comics section. So this is what I was talking about earlier with how I was doing a lot of comics that were quite out of season for the times in which I was doing it. But the thing is, see, this is something that I'm really annoyed by. The time frame in which we had for Pokemon Legends Arceus to be in the spotlight was so unbelievably short for something that I really liked. Like, it was crazy. They came out with Arceus in January of 2022. And then the fall of 2022, they had a whole new gen. It was ridiculous. We barely had any time to celebrate these really cool characters that they introduced with Arceus. And so I was like, nah, forget it. I don't care about coinciding with like timelines or popularity or this or that. I really liked Arceus and I really liked a lot of the characters that they introduced in Arceus. A lot of the concepts, a lot of everything. So I really appreciated Adamant. I really liked Irida. I really appreciated their just entire dynamic. So I was like, yeah, forget about all that other crap. I'm just gonna do what I want. And so here we are. And I made them also really long. This was also during the period where I was kind of breaking away from social media because I was kind of having like a lot of epiphanies about it all. And just artistically, I started to go in certain directions that it just wasn't supporting. So these comics were definitely mostly about practice. I posted these, but these got absolutely like no social media traction, but it didn't matter because they were mostly just experimental. Now, I don't do ship art very often, but this is obviously what this is. I really like Adamant and Irida. I think they're super cute, but also I thought this would be a really cool opportunity, especially with this first one, as you can see here, to do something more like dialogue heavy, something a little bit more even pseudo emotional, as we'll see in a bit, because I didn't have any real room to practice any of that stuff with what I was doing before. So the story here is that Adamant and Irida get lost in the Alabaster Icelands. Irida catches a quick little glimpse of a Hisuian Zoroa, and in her attempt to follow it, they basically fall down this giant icy crevice, and they end up stuck together in some ice caverns. So the situation is just them chilling, waiting, literally chilling, waiting for the Galaxy Expedition team to come and find them and rescue them. And of course, with these two being who they are, they get to bickering, blaming each other in terms of whose fault it is, etc, etc, you know the deal. For my first comic between these two, I feel like I did pretty good. You know, some characters just sort of have this kind of effect where, as an artist, I just have this sort of magnetic pull towards them. It's not necessarily because the character is like, you know, attractive looking, aesthetically pleasing, interesting looking. These things can factor into it, but it's like, it's not always like completely and utterly based around those kinds of things. Some characters just have this sort of it factor where the moment I lay eyes on them, I'm like, ooh, that character is going to be really fun to draw. I for sure knew that both Adamant and Irida would be those kinds of characters immediately, but I was only half right because Adamant was so freaking annoying to draw. Oh my god, it's so disappointing because I think he's so cool. You know what it was, strangely? He does definitely have a bunch of stuff about him that is very fun to draw, but it weirdly comes down to his hair. I could not figure out how to render certain elements of his hair, especially that little wispy piece that kind of hangs down on the side there, I for sure thought that would be like one of the best, most interesting elements to kind of like just render out. No, it was really annoying. But yeah, such a shame. It was a little forced, but I was really happy about finding an opportunity to this is gonna sound kind of weird. I was really happy about finding an opportunity to make Irida cry, because I hadn't drawn tears in like forever. And so as you can see there with the last couple of pages, especially in that last page, I was trying to evoke this sort of like shoujo-esque cry face, this over the top emotional cry face. And you know, I think I did a pretty decent job at it. It was good practice. And then lastly, in the final panel there, you can see the Zorua she was chasing. So for this next one, I really wanted for it to be good, but as I was actually like executing it and, you know, looking back on it, didn't turn out amazing. Some panels in here pretty jank, but I do appreciate it like idea wise. So like, just because this is just how they are, of course, a lot of these stories involve Adaman and Irida just being completely tsundere about each other, even though we all can tell something's going on there. There's some sparks, there's some chemistry. And so for this one, plot-wise, it basically involves, you know, Irida, she has this thing where she hates waking up early, and Adaman has this thing where he wakes up at like the crack of dawn. So one day, she gets her sleep schedule kind of messed up, and she wakes up really early. And so for once, she's watching him train in the morning with Rise Lucario. And so right off the bat, before I explain any further, I just gotta say, for some strange reason, I don't know what was up, I was getting everybody's proportions really wonky for this one. Like in that shot right over there, Adaman's head is enormous. Thought it would be a really good opportunity to draw Irida without her like head crest kinda thing that she always wears, because you know she just woke up, and also, you know, her sash, the coattails that she kind of has that she drags on the ground. But like without these elements, something about these characters just look a little too off, and I knew that when I was like doing this, but I didn't really like balance certain things out to make them still look like themselves, you know? Usually in a situation like this, that's something you do, but I just kind of failed to. And so really, this comic is about this moment right here that you see on this page. This Lucario gets a little bit too like feral during this training session, and it goes kind of berserk. So with this, I thought this would be a pretty interesting opportunity to show this really cool dominant trainer side at the same time as this sweet and caring trainer side, all in one simultaneously from Adaman here. Because it's like, you know, in the Pokemon universe, Mons are so insanely strong, but we see these moments where humans will like train with them, and we're like, what? There's just no way, right? Like, especially a Pokemon like Lucario, they do this a lot. You'll have trainers like sparring with their Pokemon, and you're like, that's just not that just doesn't seem safe. So I wanted to create a situation that kind of like seems like it's getting out of hand, but like ultimately Adaman has this sense of control, and the Lucario ultimately is, you know, a good boy. But yeah, the entire time while this is happening, Irida is watching, and she's trying her darndest not to come off as impressed, but she knows she is. But ooh, I like this one a lot. This one has some pretty good shots to it. So in this one, Adaman is on an adventure with Akari. And while he's out and about, he gets stung by a Skorupi. So he gets sent to the infirmary, and he's in the middle of recovering. And so Irida has been tasked by Silene to give him an antidote. This one gave me the chance to draw Adaman with his hair down. I like this big panel at the bottom a lot, but I feel like in the future, as I look back on it, I need to learn how to make sure that my panels aren't blending in with my like comic artwork, actually, because the panels are supposed to fade into the background. Well, I mean, I guess it depends on the situation, right? If someone wants to do something special with their panels, then maybe they don't necessarily do that. But in this situation, I feel like you can't really tell exactly what's going on here. Like, you kinda can, but some of these panels, they don't necessarily like enhance the image that you're trying to see within them. Like that long slivery panel over there on the side, it was supposed to be the door like creaking open, but it wasn't like super conveyed well. But so with this, Adaman is supposed to be like beet red. I don't think I went really, honestly, strangely enough, I don't think I went hard enough on like the blushes here, because it's not like a shy, cutesy kind of blush. I mean, like, it's kind of supposed to come off like that, but like, it's really like a sickness blush. And I guess at the time I probably didn't want to like overdo it, but in hindsight I'm realizing it probably would have helped. That's also why his ears are like that as well. I've noticed that in recent times, many artists like to do that. It really kind of emphasizes and helps push forward that redness, that sense of redness in someone's face. But upcoming for this next page, we've got probably like, I think my favorite panel that I've drawn for any of these Adaman and Irida comics. Adaman just loses like all the strength in his body, and he just goes pop right onto her shoulder. And this one's really fun because I feel like there's real beauty in the simplicity of it. It's one of those shots that kind of reminds you that from time to time, less is more. A piece of me even feels like maybe it would have been even better if I just left everything blank, like I didn't have those little speckle effects that's around everything. But yeah, bottom line, super cute panel, I love it. And of course, she freaks out, loses her mind, and he blacked out, so he doesn't even know what happened. This next page is the last page, and so like, fun fact, when I was scanning these pages into my computer, I somehow accidentally flipped my artwork, which is something that I don't usually do. It's pretty standard stuff for those who are digital artists, but traditional artists, we don't normally flip our artwork. There's this trick you can do where you can like hold your page up to the light and then you can see how it looks backwards, but I don't normally do that either. And so for this page I accidentally did it, and so like I understand why people do it, because Adamant in this top panel here, he looks like a monster flipped. It's so goofy. You don't really notice it. I don't really think that every shot of everyone should be symmetrical completely, especially a shot like this, because this is like a 3/4 kind of shot. But this is where I learned that. I finally understood why people do it. So for this next one, this one's like the longest out of the bunch. It's also, I'd say, probably like the most polished, because I for sure made sure that it would be. Like, of course, even though this was like relatively recent in comparison to a lot of my older comics, like this was from the middle of 2024, I can still pretty clearly see a lot of the flaws that it holds. But despite that, I really appreciate the amount of polish that I put into this. Very lacking in that good old jank that I be talking about consistently. These shots of Irida here being surrounded by these weasels on this water, she looks absolutely pristine. Although I probably could render this water way better now. Water is always one of those things that I'm consistently striving to try and make better, because you know, I only use black and white, I don't use any tones. And usually when it comes to rendering water, you kind of make water look like water through white, not black. Usually it'll be a lot of like the ripples that you see on top of the water, or like maybe frothing effects or stuff like that. So making water look like water in just black and white can be kind of tough. Yeah, so this comic's basically another one of those ones that's not really about anything in particular. I do like it though, it's very cute. I think I really prioritized wanting to make something really pretty first and foremost. But also, I think I wanted to make something that was a little slower, because again, I have this tendency to make my comics somehow really short on accident. So with this one, I deliberately tried to slow down the pacing and make it almost about nothing. Really, it's just about Irida. She's chilling out in the waves of Hisui. She's on the shore here, and Adamant has to come and get her because she's late to a meeting with like the Galaxy Expedition team. But like, she's really comfortable out there in the waves. She's chilling with these weasels, and she just really wants a day off today. Eventually though, Adamant, he snaps and he's like, this is not how bureaucracy works. This is not how being a leadership position works. You can't just take days off, you know, or can you? So eventually she concedes, and then she comes to shore. But then, unfortunately, something terrible happens. She loses her footing, and she falls right back into the ocean shore. And so for this shot was ridiculously difficult to get right. So obviously it was supposed to be like a little cute little thing, right? And Adamant, at the very last panel on that sequence of 3 panels up at the top there, we get a cute little blush from him, you know? He's like, whoa. But for this, I for sure was like thinking like, how far do we go with this, right? I knew going into it that I didn't want this to be like ecchi, but I knew that obviously I needed to somehow convey her being soaked. But with only black and white, it's pretty difficult to do that. And looking back on it, I think I did okay. I think this shot, like, overall, it's kind of strange to explain things in this way, but you know, sometimes with art, you can like brute force something looking good. This page has that kind of quality to it. There's a lot of technical things here that are a bit off, like especially the water. This was the reason why I wanted to do this though, for some solid practice. Drawing the foamy water's edge as well as like the water itself, figuring out where I was going to place certain like elements for clothing. I knew that I wanted like a weasel or two in the shot. It was a lot to consider. This was a pretty difficult page. But then onto this page, as you can see here, she retaliates by taking him under with her. I thought that would be pretty funny, if not at least definitely petty. Again, this is just a comic about them deffing around. The way that these Hisui comics were supposed to go, their rhythm was based around, I would pick a mon from Gen 4, and I would base the comic around that mon. It would be like the theme. Like, these comics don't have names. I just named them, like, I think it was Adamant plus Irida, and then it would be like some Pokemon's name. Like the first one was Zoroa, the one where he's in the infirmary is like Skorupi, and this one is Buizel. Everything was like based around Buizels and like floating on the water and stuff. So like the comic wouldn't exactly be about that Pokemon, but the situation would like surround it, and it would be like pretty heavily featured. So at the end here, as you can see, the commander, he shows up at the shoreline, and he's like, what is happening here? Again, I want to take this time to just compliment everything about Legends Arceus. I really appreciate that game. I really like what they've done with the Legends series now. I hope they continue to do more like wacky, innovative stuff, which of course seems to be like the whole point of these Legends games. I just say that kind of almost like slightly cynically, even though I don't feel like I'm that cynical of a person usually, right? I only say that because I don't then want them to get into too much of a rhythm with them and then just kind of coast, and then they themselves become homogenized in the grand scheme of things, you know? I hope they keep surprising us. I hope though, the only thing I don't like about these games is visually they aren't very good. Sorry, Game Freak. You guys gotta work on that, that's for sure. Like fidelity wise, but design wise, they're incredible. Because of course, Pokemon design is always insane. But yeah, so this next comic is our last one. This comic is the final comic that I made before I started doing the stuff that I'm doing now with my comics. So not even just in regards to Pokemon, this one has some pretty interesting significance to me. So with this comic, I was rushing it, but I ended up accidentally realizing that with me rushing it, a lot of what I was doing was still kind of on the same level of the stuff that I was doing before. Like I was just going through the motions, but a lot of this came together really quickly, and it kind of let me know like in general that I was getting better at making comics faster, but at the same time at the same level of quality as I was doing it before. When we get to the specific page, I'll point out the exact moment where that weird epiphany kind of hit me. But so like plot wise in this comic, we've got Adamant. He's meditating under this like icy waterfall next to these Snovers, and like you can kind of tell that I was meaning for this to be the final one, even within like the slight subtext of what's going on in this comic, especially at the end here, because there was a certain note that I really wanted to kind of leave things on because I knew this would be the final one. It's a bit cheesy, but it's really nice and it leaves you with like a good feeling to end off things on. So like while he's meditating, he's like full of all these different like doubts, insecurities, negative thoughts that he's trying to banish because he's feeling the pressure of leading the Diamond Clan into a better future, especially considering all the crazy things that have been recently happening in the Pokemon Legends Arceus story since, you know, the main character showed up. So he opens his eyes and in front of him he sees Irida, who has been silently watching him for who knows how long, which completely breaks his concentration, obviously. So with this panel, this isn't the shot I was talking about, but it kind of plays into a lot of what I will be saying. I really like this panel a lot. I think it's sort of like just really well balanced, and the background makes everything come together really nicely. It doesn't like overpower the foreground. It just feels like she's really actually present in that space. And I'm just really happy about what I achieved here. But so it's this page, and it's this top panel right here. This is what I was talking about. This is sort of where I had this weird epiphany, because like given the time frame, I knocked this out in no time without really even thinking about it, and just like freakishly it sort of like snuck up on me. Now also, of course, you got to understand that drawing forests, drawing trees, things that are organic, they lend themselves to speed more than like something that has to do with like a bunch of like lines, like buildings or something like that. But still, I noticed certain things about my own skill level that I was really proud of. And so with that said, I was like, yeah, for sure, I think it's time for me to move on to some other projects that I've had in the plans for a little bit. Also, this is the first comic where I started using some type of like toning effect. I used it for the snow. I used like a really light white marker so that I could give the snow a little bit more depth, because I just figured that without it, it would maybe make everything around them look just like, I don't know, just like a little bit too flat. I didn't want the snow to just look like this like nebulous, spongy stuff. I just figured it would really help things pop. So how this whole thing ends is like, these two have a little bit of a banter, and through it he kind of realizes that, because like headcanon wise, this comic was supposed to take place probably maybe like around the end of when Arceus was taking place. Like, let's just say that. So like through this conversation, he realizes that he's not the only one who's feeling the pressure. Obviously she's also her own clan's leader, and so when this Alpha Abomasnow appears to attack them, he realizes that he doesn't have many of his usual Pokemon on him, because this trip wasn't supposed to be a very lengthy trip. He got kind of carried away during his meditation. But then Irida, she is also there, and she obviously, of course, has his back. And we end on a really nice note of, you know, togetherness. Because of course, all throughout the story of Arceus, Diamond and Pearl clans, they weren't on the same wavelength. They were always at odds. So here we can see how things have changed. You know, I sometimes just love the cheese, you know. But yeah, these Pokemon comics were something else. I did a lot of learning through them, especially these final ones with Adamant and Irida. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this look-see. Hopefully you learned something yourself, if you're an artist as well, maybe even. That's all I got for you though, so stay inspired, stay inspirational.